Druidic discipline, physicality as spiritual practice. My name is Awen, and I am a primal druid. I'm a strength trainer, I'm a vitalist, and today I am discussing shamanic strength training, weightlifting for witches, and overall real health for heathens. The body houses all the other elements that make up the being you are for as long as you are alive. Some aspects of the soul complex, along with the mind, appear to leave the body during different stages of the death process. They all seem to depart when cardiac and respiratory functions have ceased. Until that time, the things that happen to or are witnessed by the mind and soul-spirit complex are experienced through the body. Most of us are now largely sedentary, meaning not moving or relatively still. This matters more than we might want it to, and our bodies respond to what we do with them in highly specific ways. If you move little and sit a lot at the office, in the car, at home, your body changes in response. Very few of these changes are positive. Sedentary, we lose bone density, motor control, to the ability to move how we intend to, physical strength, and agility. We also lose the sense of connection to the physical or natural worlds we physically inhabit, trading the immediate knowledge of our place in our ecosystem and all its beauty and dangers for canned stories of the lives of others. Returning to our evolutionary past as the reference, we are wired to simply move far more than most of us do now. Lacking this movement stimulus and the various changes to our biochemistry it produces, we adapt in ways that are often detrimental. Now, this is not the waxing poetic of a bodybuilder or a fitness influencer. This is insight lifted from magic practitioner and author Aidan Wachter in his refreshingly practical book, focusing on, as his title suggests, weaving fate, hypersigils, changing the past, and telling true lies. In a similarly practical vein, this video is a reflection of my perspective, from the perspective of present-day primal druidry. And while I include some ancient references, some mythic references, this is not a deep dive into historical druidry. Read my lips, hear my words. This is not a documentary. This is not an attempt at historical recreation. This is a musing in living faith. So in advance, please spare me any joyless pedantry in the form of would-be criticism in this regard, reminding me in the comments somehow that this is not historically fully accurate. That is the point. I am forewarning you that this is not an attempt at historical recreation. It is an exploration in living faith. So if you do choose to engage in historical nitpicking, as some of you are so fond of, after being fully forewarned of my perspective here, I will be responding, if at all, by telling you to post physique. Going from there, a fundamental part of my practice for a few years now is strength training, not only as a moving meditation, which can and should be explored as its own topic in its own regard, but as devotional offering and ritual in its own right. By discussing its value from my own present-day primal druidic perspective, I hope to more solidly present not simply walking nor more passive exercise, but actual weightlifting, actual strength training, both for its internal and external benefits, specifically for practitioners of whatever variety, whether or not you resonate with druidry or not, whatever kind of practitioner you are, I hope this gives you something to consider. Because as touched on in my initial quote from Weaving Fate, for people that are otherwise at least nominally well acquainted with mental discipline, far too many modern practitioners and people in general are mostly or completely divorced from their physicality and physical discipline in a way that I find to be an abject shame on both sides, and then some. A shame for the magical potential being left on the table and for the practical capability of our practitioners alive today, given that there are so many practitioners that I would like to see continue kicking as hard and as magically as they wish, as hard as possible for decades yet to come. And I personally plan on terrorizing you all for as long and as intensely as humanly and inhumanly possible. So too often, we all see modern practitioners divorcing the magical, the symbolic, perhaps even their idea of mental discipline, sort of, and I'm categorizing this in one sphere because that's how people tend to put it, from the physical, as if they are two entirely separate realms. Even worse, you see people who consider regard for one's own physicality as shallow materialism, as vanity, or as somehow oppressive or ableism. This is where I find the more non-dualistic Druidic perspective to be a blessing and such a practical way of living. Within the Druidic perspective, the symbolic is never just the symbolic. It is never simply abstract. It is not detached from us physically somehow, especially considering my opening quote in terms of us as humans experiencing life through the body. Within Druidry, the body is not something to be rejected nor transcended. And the symbolic is always linked to the physical and the practical in myriad ways. As we so often see in the Celtic lore, the myths that inform Druidic magic, both practical skills and physical transformation are connection routes to the gods, to the divine. The theme of external and internal transformation is one of the most serious and recurring throughout Celtic myths and magic. In particular, one of the most well-known stories that many pagans who might not consider themselves druids may still know of is the myth behind the high day for Ludnasa. You have the god Lu, who earned his place amongst the gods, amongst the Tuatha De Danann, by being the sort of ultimate Renaissance man, in that he was a master of all skills, not simply mental strategy, but physical prowess in different domains. And this is seen as iron sharpening iron, internally and ultimately externally, as his literal in route with the deities, as complementary skills, not detracting from, but encouraging each other. It is also worth noting that the infamous Irish berserker, among many other traits, Cuchulainn, was in part brought up and taught the art of war by a female warrior who also appeared to be a druid, Skaha, which means the shadowy one. But the most readily accessible illustration of this druidic perspective is simply looking at the model of the three cauldrons, which I've repeatedly taught on in person, that I love to teach about, and I believe I have videos on, and if not, I will sometime soon, but it is very easily accessible to learn about through the work of Ian Corrigan, Luke Eastwood, John Michael Greer, and I will quickly summarize here. So as stated, Druidry is not about abstract ideas, nor empty belief. It is all about action, real experience, real transformation, true ordeal, immersion, and journey. It is also about obsession with the number 3. So in the Celtic or Celtic-inspired Druidry, where we have these 3 cauldrons, they are psychosomatic portals or points of connection within the body that correlate to the great other, to these other great 3s. Connected to that first big 3 of the gods, nature spirits, and ancestors are those 3 cauldrons, mind-body energy centers of creation, vocation, and wisdom. Connected to these are the 3 realms of land, sea, and sky. The cauldrons are both energetic and physical, portals to deepen our connection to the powers that be. The cauldron of knowledge, of wisdom in the mind. This is wisdom, vision, and clarity. This is the gods in the heavens. It is winds, air, breath, that animating voice, that pneuma. Cauldron of vocation and motion in the heart. This is your calling in life. It is magical movement. It is the ancestors and sea and blood. The cauldron of warming, incubation. It is in the loins. It is the living universe between one's legs, as they say. This is fertility and creation and life and flesh. It is related to the earth, the physical realm that we inhabit, and the nature spirits. Beyond the myths, what we are looking at when we look at the Cauldron of Poesy is one of the most sacred sources of ancient inspiration in Druidry, in the form of the Cauldron of Poesy, which you can very easily find online. And it tells us, there are then 2 divisions of joy that turn the cauldron of wisdom, divine joy and human joy. In human joy, there are 4 divisions amongst the wise: sexual intimacy, the joy of health untroubled by the abundance of goading when a person takes up the prosperity of bardcraft, the joy of the binding principle of wisdom after good poetic construction, and joy of fitting poetic frenzy, ... I will not read the whole thing to you. I heavily invite you to read it for yourself. It is well worth it. But very explicitly, we are told the joy of health untroubled is second only to sex, God's blessed Druidry for our priorities. It's worth noting again that these are expressed in the same breath. We have sex, good health, and then poetry and poetic frenzy, which you can accurately see as almost redundancies or reiterations of that same energy, of the very same energy in different iterations. So truly the Druidic viewpoint presents this beautifully triadic mind, body, soul perspective that does not divorce the magical from the physical, where magic is always imbuing the physical and the physical imbues the magical in kind and so on in a flowing relationship, as is so crucial in Druidry's relationship. So to come full circle to the subject of this video, that is the perspective I would like to present more solidly to practitioners of whatever variety. From my religious background of Druidry, when I train for my ancestors who lived and died so that I could be here. I train for the natural vitality which fuels me so I may feel it in kind in my turn. But most of all, I train in devotional offering to my patron goddess, Sovereignty herself, the Morrigan. Strength training is especially potent for practitioners because if you are a serious practitioner of whatever variety, you already have the beginnings of the tool set to see you through the mental aspects. And again, in the Druidic perspective, we have this innate call to ordeal, to immerse ourselves in the Imrama, the sea journey into the other world, where that journey is as full of hardship and transformation as it is creation and ecstasy. Training is innately confrontational. And once you get to anything resembling serious training, it is going to demand whatever mental, emotional, meditative, and for me, spiritual tool sets you have to continue to embrace that ordeal and not simply stop at the first sign of discomfort, well before you hit the kind of failure needed to truly build strength and or muscle size depending on what your goals are. So working out will by nature physically move energy out and in again of the area that you are training as well as your entire being. There are workouts that will bring out specific memories that are being held in the parts of the body that you are training. There are workouts that will bring out trauma. There are workouts that will just simply bring out whatever is being physically held within you. And there are levels of progress that cannot be reached without experiencing and transcending very real suffering, both within and without. For myself and for some of the lifters that I work with or have simply witnessed, people can start crying, they can start laughing. People have to viscerally deal with whatever is bubbling up, coming out from within us. And you may move through any number of states in this voluntary confrontation and embrace of ordeal to the aim of your own well-being and strength at the bare minimum, let alone whatever else you are striving towards or valuing in this process. This is where I, like many others, refer to lifting as iron alchemy, because you are doing hundreds, if not thousands, of exorcisms and births and deep transformations and deaths in yourself internally in the process of transforming yourself, your being completely. And this is where we are blessed to be able to treat lifting as a ritual experience. Ritual is where we can confront that ordeal head on in a meaningful experiential narrative, where we experience that catharsis and growth and reckon with our own life force, and where it can more deeply interface and engage with the realms, with the powers that be, and more. Beyond all of this, something I make no secret of is that my strength training is, as I said, devotional. It is my most significant recurring offering to my patron goddess, Sovereignty herself. And to segue somewhat, this is significant because the offering matches the current of energy that I would be calling in. The Morrigan is the goddess of sovereignty, for whom battle mainly, and vengeance and prophecy and much more, is a means to an end, though not the end in and of itself. Additionally, transformation is one of her powers. My strength training is largely the channel through which she flows into and thus occupies space in my life, in part because this is how I sculpt myself into being, not only as one devoted to her, but as an avatar of herself, where I tap into one of her abilities and physically transform myself. Most often during my lifting is where I will experience visions of her, where I get my sense of direction for her will in my life, and where I consecrate myself in her service most seriously. I don't like to miss more than a few days regardless, But if I do miss more than 2 days or so without a very good reason, and sometimes even with a good reason, like simply being sick, her voice and her general sense of guidance and direction will drift and become more distant from me until I start lifting seriously again. So to continue moving out of the spiritual factors and more into the purely empirical, I will shift with two rather potent quotes. The society that separates its scholars from its warriors will have its thinking done by cowards and its fighting by fools. Modern practitioners are essentially unnecessarily separating that which is not actually separate more often than not. So to skip cultures a little bit to answer the innate question in that statement, I will cite Socrates. It is a shame for a man to grow old without seeing the beauty and strength of which his body is capable. Obviously, the gender in that statement is absolutely irrelevant. The statement stands. Why should we have our magic done by those divorcing aspects of nature as if we are not part of nature itself? And why should we have our lifting done by arguably too many two-dimensional caricatures of people, ignoring the spiritual component and doing so sometimes indeed for vanity? Consider this all for yourself. So with all of this spiritual meat or imbas in mind, to divorce from even my own perspective for a moment and just ask on a purely empirical level, why strength training? Why not walking or dancing or any other kind of physical movement or motion? There are objective, data-driven reasons. Not all movement is created equal, not in aim, not in form, and not in function. I very often will see well-intentioned people, more often than not, but you see people make statements to the effect that all movement is good movement, and any exercise is better than none. While this is often the attitude that I will take with beginners, and it is accurate, it is not true. It is accurate, but it is not true, and I would like to reject that frame. To say that all movement is good and any exercise is good because it's better than nothing is like claiming that subsisting exclusively on Cheez-Its is better than simply not eating. It is a mentally impoverished premise that is setting up a false dichotomy which does not truthfully illustrate the choices at hand. On a purely physical, empirical level, unless we do something about it, the decay of skeletal muscle mass is inevitable with age. It's called sarcopenia, which is simply the loss of skeletal muscle mass, strength, and physical function that comes with being blessed enough to see old age, in addition to the heightened risk of osteoporosis, which is simply your bones becoming so brittle and porous that they are more susceptible to cracking and breaking. This should very seriously concern all of us. That eventually comes for us all, unless we get ahead of it, which we can with lifting weights. So while very good on other metrics, a leisurely stroll, for example, will not help us from becoming helpless with age. A lively Zumba class will not fortify us against losing the skeletal muscle mass required to take basic care of ourselves. Pilates absolutely will not build strength. It is not for that. That is a separate video, however. So barring whatever extreme circumstances such as debilitating chronic illness, being paralyzed, something horrific like that that truly prevents you from strength training. I'm not talking about you guys if you suffer from that. That kind of loss of strength and muscle and ability to move your own body as you intend to do, as long as you can, as long as we are alive, it is 100% optional if you lift weights, if you do serious strength training. So that is why. Strength training gives us a deeper, more direct capability in the day-to-day from helping the people around us, from helping ourselves to the people around us, which is rather heavy on my mind, that I simply cannot imagine not having access to if I can help it. I understand that plenty of people are trying so hard to be nice that we are bending over backwards to tell people that being sedentary, that morbid obesity, that not taking care of yourselves in so many capacities, that everything and anything is okay and valid. But the premise of prioritizing emotional judgment and so-called validity over literal capability is actually only damaging and really just wreaking havoc on everyone involved. Because again, as I started out by saying, I would like to see practitioners and good people overall kicking as hard and as long as they possibly can. So those perceived moral or emotional metrics, this idea of beauty standards and aesthetic judgment of other people and what have you, That is really not what any of this is about. And I would like to, again, redirect the focus to capability, which flows back into that spiritual component very directly. So even if this sounds harsh, I will be as starkly honest as possible, so there is no doubt what my actual opinion is. Contrary to the altogether too popular frameworks now of ableism, or claiming that physical fitness is oppressive or supremacist somehow, I do not see anything remotely liberating, empowering, or at all positive about becoming physically helpless when I can avoid it. There's nothing empowering about becoming physically helpless, about becoming incapable, or even becoming diminished in my capacity to help myself, let alone anyone else. I see nothing positive or empowering about having to depend on other people, on medication, on God to know what else I would have to depend on to stay functional if I do not take care of myself and if I am not ultimately literally in control of my own body. I could care less if the people around me think my appearance or my choices are valid. I could care less about your opinions, with all due respect. If I cannot take care of my body in a basic functional way or do what I want with my own body, that is the real issue. To me, that is one of the most nightmarish fates imaginable, and it should deeply concern all of us. So I would really invite people, and practitioners especially, as that is what I consider my lane more or less, I would invite people to reconsider the whole mental model that they are taking in approach to physicality, to take it away from the sort of emotional and appearance-based judgment, morality, validity metric, and into the capability-based. Just what am I literally able to do? What am I capable of doing? How long am I going to live? What is my quality of life going to be? If we are, lucky enough to see old age, the same things come for us all eventually, unless we get ahead of it. Now, for example, I really love cool old women. I love my grandma collection of friends. I very happily look forward to the honor of becoming a cool old lady myself when my time comes. But it is in our hands and it is our choice how that comes for us. So this is where we have the choice to embrace ordeal for ourselves in the micro, so that life itself does not become an unrelenting affliction, not of our choosing, not a voluntary ordeal in the macro. It is in our hands. So especially for practitioners who are navigating our own life force to mediate relationships with the powers that be, with me for the gods, the nature spirits, the ancestors, being in good health very much matters and makes a notable difference in the kind of magic that you can even do. When it comes to the magic I do, the kind of trance states that I enter and shamanic experiences I have, very often can be physically strenuous and physically demanding. So the fact that I can basically do whatever I want with my own body, it makes it so physical capacity is not a limitation to my magic, but a channel for deeper connection into divinity. So I cannot and will not speak for anyone else, but when I am in trance states, doing ritual either independently, as in on my own, or with other people, very often I will physically contort. I will be gyrating my entire body weight repeatedly for what I can only guess is at least minutes, if not more. And I will feel myself doing extended spasms of serious physical movement until the ritual is done, until it is out. I very often, again, do not fully remember what I do during ritual, but I know that some of them are minutes, but some of them can be hours. I very clearly, because someone else made a comment, I remember a Beltane working a few years ago where I recall what I was doing partially because I got accused of, quote, fucking the fire. So I had already jumped over the fire, as one does, as is the fashion at the time at Beltane rituals, but I had gotten on my hands and knees, I was in the dirt, I was clawing around, and I was just repeatedly, apparently, squatting and thrusting and physically imbuing myself with the fertile, virile life force energy, that fruitfulness, which has been fruiting in my life ever since, in all honesty. But in the moment, one of the ritualists accused me of fucking the fire, which was true, and it works, and I'm glad that I'm able to do it. So I bring all of this up for a few different reasons. One of them, I think, is that much of the kind of magic that I tap into, personally, absolutely can be accessed by people at different levels of physical fitness. However, if someone doesn't even stretch, let alone do anything that demands stamina or endurance, let alone strength training, I need water, my God. For one, there is a very strong chance that you will not be able to fully physically execute the kind of connection that you are energetically feeling or intuiting. For two, even if you do pull off some or all of what you are feeling called to do physically, even if you do pull off physically demanding magic like that, either you can basically be rode, or rather possessed in a manner of speaking, by the energy or by the deity long enough to do it, to get it done, and then potentially be, for lack of a better word, physically fucked up and just sore and out of sorts for the next however many days, because your body is not actually able to do that. Or your body might just give out before the magic is actually done because you are literally not capable of doing it. And again, forgive my informal language, that would really suck. That would truly suck. And that is the point that I am actually driving home here. So even outside of direct shamanic magic itself, there are simply physically confrontational activities that I am sitting on my foot here. Oof. There are physically confrontational activities that are either meant to induce trance states or reverence, or at least meant for meditative or altered states of consciousness that will be objectively better if you are physically fit. This can be literally making physical pilgrimages to difficult to reach sacred sites, like holy mountains, like caves, where you're either climbing or you're shimmying yourself down or you're doing something demanding. It can be meditative or shamanic sauna experiences that can take a lot out of you physically as well as internally. It can be cold plunges. It can be ecstatic dance that goes on for who knows how long. It can be sleeping on graves, as the ancient Druids used to. It can be sensory deprivation. The list really goes on, but that is the point. When you are physically capable and in control of your own body, the sky is kind of the limit when it comes to the magic that you can do. So yes, there are many different ways to skin a cat. There are many different ways to do magic that are not just physical. However, a few different things. For one, as we said within Druidry, the symbolic is not just the symbolic in some abstract sense. It is not divorced from us. It is often directly connected to the physical realm and physicality. For two, whatever kind of magic I'm called to do for whatever reason, and sometimes that is me simply sitting still and only energetically traveling to the other realms, it is a net positive for me that my body is not an obstacle when it comes to my craft, because our magic and our ability to execute is directly related to our life force energy, to our vitality, to our health, and our well-being. So when it comes to my own training, I absolutely treat it as ritual, because it is. And thus, I will start often with an evocation to my patron goddess, dedicating my strain and my strength to her, transformation of my body and mind and devotion to her, in the effort of calling that energy of sovereignty into me. Then as I begin, often at least for the first few sets, I will either silently or quietly, or depending on my environment, intone and vibrate her name, Moregan, across my repetitions, either her name in full with each count, or breaking it up across my reps, depending on what I am called to do. Just extremely powerful for me. But for anyone listening to this who is either not ready or not interested for whatever reason in regarding lifting as a ritual for any reason, but who still might want to take a more mindful, animistic, pagan, dare I say, approach, I invite you to consider the practice of moving meditations, which spans across paths from Buddhism to Christian monastic practices of walking labyrinths and well beyond, with the perspective of a moving meditation which does not need to be attached to any religious path, or could be attached to whatever you are doing. Here, you might bring to the workout more of a sense of curiosity, letting your awareness remain open to whatever comes up, perhaps, without trying to direct it anywhere in particular energetically, and fortifying your will and your life force as it gets difficult. So hopefully in this video, I have at least presented you with some worthwhile imbas, some inspiration, some meat to chew on, and apply as you see fit. Do whatever you will with this. So to conclude the video, although I am sure I will return to this topic, I want to read the ending of a piece that I have sent to countless friends and lifters over the years, The Great Iron and the Soul by a notable modern-day Renaissance man, a combination lifter and bard, a maker of pilgrimages, and I'm not good at sitting down, I'm sorry, a maker of pilgrimages and more, the great Henry Rollins of Black Flag. Iron and the Soul. I prefer to work out alone. It enables me to concentrate on the lessons that the iron has for me, Learning about what you're made of is always time well spent, and I have found no better teacher. The iron had taught me how to live. Life is capable of driving you out of your mind. The way it all comes down these days, it's some kind of miracle if you're not insane. People have become separated from their bodies. They are no longer whole. I see them move from their offices to their cars and on to their suburban homes. They stress out constantly. They lose sleep. They eat badly. And they behave badly. Their egos run wild. They become motivated by that which will eventually give them a massive stroke. They need the iron mind. Through the years, I have combined meditation, action, and the iron into a single strength. I believe that when the body is strong, the mind thinks strong thoughts. Time spent away from the iron makes my mind degenerate. I wallow in a thick depression. My body shuts down my mind. The iron is the best antidepressant I have ever found. There is no better way to fight weakness than with strength. Once the mind and body have been awakened to their true potential, it is impossible to turn back. The iron never lies to you. You can walk outside and listen to all kinds of talk, get told that you're a god or a total bastard. The iron will always kick you the real deal. The iron is the great reference point, the all-knowing perspective giver, always there like a beacon in the pitch black. I have found the iron to be my greatest friend. It never freaks out on me, never runs. Friends may come and go, but 200 pounds is always 200